Well, hello everyone. So I did a video a little while back on recommended reading for Ex-JWs. That video is fine, but I think I can do it more justice, so I'll return to that in the future. But in particular, in this video, I wanted to zero in on great memoirs that Ex-JWs might like to read. You know, on the forums, the book, Amber Scorah's book, Leaving the Witness, comes up all the time, and that it's a great book. But there's some other books that are really good also, and I hardly ever see them mentioned on the forums. So I thought I'd just mention a few of them here. So in no particular order, here they are. Number 1, Educated, a memoir by Tara Westover. This was published in 2018. It's 352 pages. And by the way, I'll link to all the books in the description below. But Tara Westover grew up, I guess you'd say nominally it was a Mormon family, but her parents had these really fringe beliefs, even for Mormons. They were really out there. She was never vaccinated because her parents didn't trust the government. She never attended public school because, again, they didn't trust the government. She didn't know when her birthday was because her parents never got a birth certificate. So it was a pretty unusual upbringing. So Tara relates really well about this unusual life that she led as a kid, and kind of disjointed. Like in some ways, her family seemed to be loving in some aspects, and yet in other areas she had a lot of problems. One of her brothers in particular was fairly abusive to her. So she had a lot of brothers and sisters, and so some of the older ones, some of them kind of left the family beliefs and went on to have these academic secular careers, and then some of them sort of stuck with the family beliefs. And eventually, when Tara got old enough, she decided to go off to college. And I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say, but she kept going with school and eventually got a PhD from Cambridge University, which was pretty wild for not ever attending public school. So I think for Ex-JWs in particular, Tara really captures well the feeling of otherness that you have. And so even when she went off to community college, the feeling that she didn't fit in with everybody else, like she knew she didn't fit in, but then she didn't know how to fix that, like what to do about it. And even if she wanted to change, it felt bad. She felt, worldly and immoral for trying to fit in more with the other girls. And you kind of see that theme all through, even when she was working on her PhD. She felt like she wasn't really good enough, or that she was always trying to catch up to everybody else. So it's a really great book. If you look on the book jacket, it's recommended by Bill Gates and President Obama. So it was number 1 on the New York Times bestseller list in 2018. So it's a really great book. Definitely recommended. All right, number 2, Unfollow, a memoir of loving and leaving the Westboro Baptist Church by Megan Phelps-Roper. This was published in 2019, 304 pages. So Megan Phelps, she grew up, as the title says, in the Westboro Baptist Church, which is almost a universally hated church that would picket funerals of soldiers, and had really offensive rhetoric. Oh, awful organization. But so it seems very two-dimensional. And so Megan grew up in this church. Her grandfather founded the Westboro Baptist Church. And she does a really nice job of fleshing out this, what you would think is a very two-dimensional thing, and helping to explain like how a good person could be a member of this church, and how the beliefs could be justified by any number of Bible scriptures. And so she talks about what life in the church was like, And then, so that's really interesting. And then eventually she gets to this point in her 20s where she starts to have doubts about the beliefs. She was sort of the church's person that ran their Twitter account. And by her interactions on Twitter with other folks that didn't belong to the church, she started to, wake up to the belief that the church might not be the truth. Then she goes on to describe the process of leaving, and that was really painful and in her life, after that point. So again, for Ex-JWs, I think it's really interesting because she captures pretty well the feeling, the turmoil of waking up while you're in an organization, waking up to the fact that this may not be the truth, and then having to deal with, well, if I leave, what about all my family that's still in the organization? And that discomfort. Later in her journey of leaving, she encounters Jehovah's Witnesses, and so that's an interesting chapter, how they helped her to work through her thinking, and then also the effect that she had on their thinking. So a really nice book. Definitely recommend it. Number 3, just to mention it again, Leaving the Witness, Exiting a Religion and Finding a Life by Amber Scorah. I've mentioned it before, and I think it's the most well-known book among ex-JWs. So again, published in 2019, 288 pages. Amber Scorah's story of growing up as a JW, going off to China to serve where the need was great. And so that aspect of what preaching and JW activity in China is like is really interesting. And then the story of her waking up process is really nicely explained. Just a lovely little book. I read a book, I remember as a kid, called The China Year, and it was about a girl who went to China for 1 year while her parents were teachers over there. And I think Amber really does a nice job. This book reminds me of that as far as capturing the strangeness and the loveliness of China, of Chinese culture. Number 4, The Reluctant Apostate, Leaving Jehovah's Witnesses Comes at a Price by Lloyd Evans. This was published in 2017. It's 802 pages, so it's a long sucker. That's basically because it's almost 2 books in one. So on the one hand, it's Lloyd's memoir of growing up as a witness and then eventually leaving the religion and that process for him. And then on the other hand, it's almost a complete history of the Jehovah's Witness religion and talking about the many odd beliefs and things that don't really make sense. So he does a really good job breaking down some of the main problems with JW theology. I did a video a little while back on wacky quotes from the Golden Age magazine back in the 20s. And I kind of slowed up on that because rereading Lloyd's book, The Reluctant Apostate, he evidently read all the early literature. And so he's really pulled most of the really crazy quotes that you can find from JW literature throughout its history. So it's a really good book. It's a long read, but it's a good one for sure. Number 5, The Book of Separation, a Memoir by Tova Mirvis. This was published in 2017. It's 320 pages. So Tova Mirvis was a woman that she grew up in Orthodox Judaism and kind of lived her whole life within that structure. Got married, had kids, and then in middle age she started to have doubts and started to wake up again that this might not be the true religion. And so this is her memoir of that process. So she really helps to, talk about her own thought process here, as well as sort of shining a light on Orthodox Judaism, which I think, again, is a religion that everybody sort of has a superficial idea of what it is, but not really anything beyond that. So it's an interesting book in that respect. I haven't quite finished it. It wasn't quite clicking for me, to be honest. And that might just because she's a woman with kids and I'm a guy with no kids. But I think there's a lot of, ex-JWs that can relate to that situation of being in a marriage with children and then suddenly waking up that, oh, this is not what I believe anymore, and now what do I do? It's a really good book in that regard, and I felt I should include it on the list here. Number 6, Shunned, How I Lost My Religion and Found Myself by Linda A. Curtis. This was published in 2018. It's 320 pages. So Linda Curtis, she was a Jehovah's Witness, grew up in the faith, and again got married and eventually left the religion. So the book briefly talks about her life as a witness, but really starts at the point of her leaving. And she had a fairly interesting life after that. She went on to be a banking executive initially, and then she became an executive coach. And I think now she's a mindfulness teacher. And then she wrote this memoir. I'll be honest, this wasn't my favorite book to read. And it's just because her life seemed to go so well after leaving the Witnesses. Like, she left, she got divorced, and then almost instantly she was the vice president of a bank and was in this fulfilling relationship with a non-witness. And I felt kind of bad reading it. Like, how did she do all that so quickly and so easily? So, but, she does have some interesting things in her book. She talks about exploring, trying to find her spirituality after leaving the religion of Jehovah's Witnesses. And so there's some interesting things she writes about, trying different avenues to, be a spiritual person. So yeah, maybe not my favorite book on the list here, but I thought it was worth mentioning just because there aren't that many ex-JW memoirs out there. Number 7, Fading Out of the JW Cult, a memoir by Bonnie Zieman. This was published in 2016. It's 240 pages. So you might recognize the name Bonnie Zieman. She was a therapist, and she's written several books actually helping Jehovah's Witnesses who are leaving the faith. So this is her memoir. Probably her most well-known book is Exiting the JW Cult, A Healing Handbook, where she has a lot of practical advice for witnesses that have left. She also wrote a short book that's handy to give to therapists who might be unfamiliar with the JW religion and what its actual detrimental effects are on people. And so, so this is, if you had to pick one book by Bonnie Zieman, I think the Exiting the JW Cult book is the one to have. But this is definitely a nice accompaniment where she talks about her own history, her own story as a witness. She grew up in the organization. She got married. Her husband and herself were special pioneers up in Canada for a good while. I know at one point she has an anecdote about running into David Splain when he was also up in Canada before he became a governing body member. And then eventually she, became disillusioned. She started to have doubt. She woke up. They left the witness faith. She went to college, which she'd always wanted to do. So she went as an adult. She eventually got her master's degree and became a therapist and had a nice career. She mentions that one of her most rewarding things was when a witness would come into her practice and she was able to help them to work through their doubts and turmoil. So definitely a nice book to read if you'd like to know more about Bonnie Zieman's history. So those are our 7 memoirs that I thought were pretty good. And maybe I'll add one honorable mention because I was really surprised when I was kind of looking in the genre. I was surprised that there weren't more ex-Mormon books. The Mormon religion is bigger than the Witnesses, and there's definitely more ex-Mormons, looking at the ex-Mormon subreddit and whatnot. But yeah, Tara Westover's book was kind of the main one that I ran across, and that is a really good book. So I thought maybe just as an honorable mention, I would add the book Under the Banner of Heaven by John Krakauer. He's a really good author. You know, he wrote the book Into Thin Air about the deaths on Mount Everest, which was really interesting. And so Under the Banner of Heaven is a book that he wrote exploring the Mormon religion. And in it, it's kind of two stories in one. On the one hand, he discusses the history and formation of the Mormon religion, which is pretty interesting, and in some ways parallels the JW creation, but there's a number of differences as well. And on the other hand, he weaves that into this modern day account of some sort of fundamentalist fringe Mormons that eventually commit this ritualistic murder, and the account of that. So it's really an exploration of this faith and what happens when faith and credulity and belief goes too far, what can occur within religions. So I thought I'd throw that out there. It was a nice book to read if you want to learn more about kind of our sister faith, I guess, Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses. But yeah, that's what I wanted to discuss in this video. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you'd like to, and we'll catch you all next time. Take care.